Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of our series Rethink, Reconfigure, Reinvent. As the economic activity resumes gradually, the question of how urban life will look like in the future is also being discussed. Would people prefer to use public transport? Would residents opt for less crowded suburban neighborhoods where they can live in, a bit more freer, open space as compared to the high density, compact living that we are used to now? Would remote working become mainstream? How can our cities become a safer place for our migrant and blue collar workers? The recent past has exposed some glaring gaps in the way Indian urban centers have grown post independence. How can India's urban centers rethink, reconfigure, and reinvent themselves to become more inclusive and fit for future? To discuss all of this, I have with me my colleague Shivanshu. The pandemic has really changed our cities, right? How do you see this further change? What is the roadmap of Indian cities from here on?
I think I'll focus on three aspects to answer this question. One is, how will this pandemic change the form and structure of our cities? Second, how do we look at planning in the context of the present situation? And the third is, how do we look at the larger urbanization? So when you look at the first one, it's going to change the form and shape of our cities. In a scenario where everyone is predominantly working from home, doing online shopping, which means we'll have multiple CBDs within the city, which vary in significance in sizes. I think we need to relook out as to how we plan our cities. We need to see how do we bring in urban health into the urban planning side of it. How do we create more of these hyper-local solutions, which would also mean, can we create a 15-minute city where people just walk into whatever their needs are? Third is, we are seeing a lot of this digital revolution coming in. How do we integrate that technology into it? How do we leverage these digital solutions to move towards a more evidence-based decision making? And at the heart of it, we need to understand that economy is something that will drive the development of cities. So while doing it, how can planning help us build a more resilient economy? And this has to be greener as well. So how do we create those nature-based solutions which help us create a resilient economy while ensuring that the development is greener than what it has been in the past? The next aspect is to look at how do we look at urbanization as a whole? So presently it has been concentrated in select metropolitan cities, which could be top 10, 15 cities in the country. Now these tier 2, tier 3 cities are going to catch this inevitable urbanization wave. How do we make them ready before this wave comes into their cities? How do we make them more planned so that whenever this urbanization reaches there and they have to respond to this opportunity, they are well prepared the way we want them to be prepared?
Shivanshu, today ESG is at the core of every conversation around being fit for future. It is not just a matter of compliance today, right? So, how could Indian cities move forward on the ESG agenda?
Cities are the core ground of the SDG implementation, and it gives the authority an opportunity to drive the ESG agenda at the ground level. And they will play a very important role as we are driving this whole ESG wave. What they need to do is to create these project pipelines which are ESG compliant, look at how the cities are governed, look at how to make projects more implementable, more bankable. Creating some of these things will help us drive private investments also into the cities, which would also mean that we can get in more of impact investors, which are very active in the ecosystem today. So Arnab, Indian cities are on a transformative journey. So what do you think? How can technology aid this transformation and make our cities fit for future?
Well, considering the state of our urban centers, we need to implement innovative solutions at speed and scale. And technology will be one of the important enablers for that. Our cities and city planners recognize this, and as a result, we have witnessed significant technology integration across cities. Well, we've seen several innovative interventions. Some of these include establishing the Indian Urban Observatory in the MOHUA. It's the real-time centralized city monitoring system, right? The National Urban Innovation Hub, the Data Maturity Assessment Framework for Smart Cities, which for the first time our cities now have city data officers appointed and who are working to leverage the data and use AI for benefiting citizens and evidence-based decision making. Very active startup ecosystem who are trying to solve the urban problems from various angles. It could be around usage of drones, around blockchain, around advanced analytics, for improving the service delivery as well as the governance across India's cities. And my only view is that considering the size of the country and the magnitude of the problem and the number of cities that we have, I think we are still, at the tip of the iceberg, and technology will continue to play a very important role in helping us leverage the urbanization in the right earnest. Well, Shivanshu, all transformations need funding. So, how can Indian cities attract more private sector investments to create a sustainable public infrastructure?
Private sector is going to be a very, very important stakeholder. But we need to look at from two sides. One is attracting the private sector directly. And second, attracting this funding which is coming in from multilaterals, which could be direct funding from multilaterals or multilaterals trying to direct the private sector funding into it. However, there's a basic requirement over there. And the requirement is to create infrastructure which is greener, which is more resilient, which means can we look at more of urban jungles being created? Can we look at more circular economy related interventions in the city? Can we create more of these cycle tracks? And at the same time, governance, which is a major aspect in a city and is something that a lot of interventions have happened. How do we improve that whole governance side? The second part of it is the whole revenue generation within the city itself, which is the revenue of the corporations, of other authorities at the city level. Now, what kind of value capture financing models can come in? This is something that we have talked about for a long time, and we are seeing some initiatives over there. There are cities which are going about raising bonds. So on one side, if they strengthen their own financial position, and on the other side, create projects which are bankable and also compliant with the ESG agenda or the aspects that are important for a private sector, for an impact investor, or for a multilateral agency, I think that is something which is going to drive the private sector investment into the cities.
So, Shivanshu, one of the thoughts which comes to my mind is that a city is for all its citizens, right? Irrespective of their economic strata, gender, ability, age. So, how do we make our cities far more inclusive in the future?
City belongs to all its citizens, and it is something which should get ingrained in our planning process. What happens at times is that we look at inclusive cities from a social lens, but forget the fact that there is a huge economic rationale behind it. So a culture of inequality and exclusion is not something which is going to help us economically. So we need to revisit our planning process. We need to look at how do we design cities which are more disabled friendly, which are safer, which are inclusive. Now, when we say inclusive city, we need to look at three aspects. One, we need to create infrastructure to ensure that good quality urban services are delivered to all categories of citizens. The next one is to ensuring that we protect the rights of the most marginalized ones in society. And the third is to create economic opportunities for all the citizens. Now, when we look at all of these three factors together, and these are also self-reinforcing, that's when we are able to create more disabled-friendly, more livable, more happy cities, and more smarter cities.
Thank you for those interesting insights, Shivanshu. The pandemic has definitely transformed the way we live, work, interact, commute, or even, recreate in the weekends. Today, there's a greater consensus, I would say, among citizens and policymakers on the need to consider environmental sustainability, whether it's around focusing on inclusive growth or having a stronger social security net to make our cities more livable and far more resilient. So I would think that as India rethinks, reconfigures, and reinvents its urban areas, digital would aid this journey, and keeping ESG at its core will act as a compass. So thank you, viewers, for joining in. I hope you found it interesting. We'll be back soon with another interesting topic. Until then, take care and stay safe.